It's one of the most misunderstood ideas in modern relationships, the notion that emotional distance, even a hint of unavailability, is not just tolerated by women, it's often what draws them in most powerfully. Now, I know how that sounds. To some it may seem cold, even cruel, but let's not confuse cruelty with clarity or distance with disregard. There's a profound psychological and even evolutionary truth here that we often overlook because we're so seduced by the idea that more is always better. More communication, more closeness, more availability. And yet, over and over again, both science and really human experience tell us that desire doesn't grow in constant closeness. It grows in space. You see, attraction isn't built on comfort alone. It's built on tension, on anticipation, on the unknown. And women, just like men, are wired to desire what is valued, what is earned, and what feels slightly out of reach. That doesn't mean playing games or being deceptive. It means knowing your own worth to such a degree that you don't feel compelled to constantly present yourself, explain yourself, or overextend yourself just to be liked. Emotional distance, when rooted in self-respect, isn't cruelty, it's magnetism. Think about how many men chase endlessly, trying to prove their devotion in every moment. They send long texts, always initiate, always show up first, always say yes. And then they wonder why the woman starts to lose interest. The truth is, it's not because women don't appreciate kindness. It's because there's no edge, no gravity, no polarity. She feels smothered, not because of the care, but because of the need behind it. And neediness kills desire faster than anything else. It signals one very dangerous idea: you value her more than yourself. Now contrast that with the man who isn't rushing. He's not indifferent, he's simply grounded. His energy doesn't flood her space. He listens without trying to fix. He gives attention, but not all of it. He knows she's not the center of his world, because his purpose is. And that quiet certainty creates mystery. Not because he's hiding anything, but because he doesn't feel the urge to reveal everything. From a psychological perspective, this taps into what's known as the uncertainty principle of attraction. The less predictable someone is, the more space the mind creates for fantasy, reflection, and desire. When someone is always there, the mind has no time to wonder, no space to project, no curiosity left to explore. Certainty is comfortable, but it is not exciting. Desire thrives not on what's already possessed, but on what is almost within reach. It thrives on imagination, not familiarity. Philosophically, this also touches on the nature of longing. As Esther Perel often says, desire needs a bridge, and that bridge is space. Distance invites longing, longing deepens connection. But when closeness collapses that space completely, when you're always available, always texting back in seconds, always explaining yourself, always adapting, there's no bridge left, just immediacy. And immediacy isn't romantic, it's transactional. Many men fear that distance will be misunderstood. They're terrified that not replying instantly will seem rude, or that taking time for themselves will be interpreted as disinterest. But the reality is, women are incredibly intuitive. They can feel the difference between emotional avoidance and emotional sovereignty. One is running away from intimacy. The other is moving towards self-possession. And self-possession is deeply attractive. It tells her, I know who I am with or without your validation. This is why some women describe falling for men who didn't even try that hard. It's not because those men were cold or careless. It's because they weren't trying to be chosen. They were busy choosing themselves. Their distance wasn't emotional abandonment. It was evidence of inner stability. They weren't seducing her with words. They were seducing her with self-control. And let's be honest, in a world of men who constantly chase, who constantly overcompensate, who constantly fear rejection, that kind of restraint is rare. And what's rare is valued. So yes, what may seem like cruelty to the overly empathetic or to those addicted to immediate closeness is actually a quiet, confident boundary that says, I don't need you to choose me in order to feel whole. But if you do, you'll be choosing a man who's already complete. This doesn't mean playing hard to get. It means being hard to own. It means not collapsing your center just because someone is beautiful or kind or showing interest. Because here's the uncomfortable truth: the moment you abandon yourself in order to win her affection, you become less attractive. And you teach her that your value depends on her attention. That's not love. That's codependency dressed up in flowers. There's something incredibly dignified about the man who can feel deeply, but doesn't need to reveal all his feelings immediately. Who can want someone, but not chase them to the point of self-erasure. Who can be available, but not overly accessible. Who can connect, but still leave room for wonder. So if it seems cruel to pull back, to go silent, to not always be there, ask yourself, what's the intention? If it's rooted in fear or control, then yes, it is cruel. But if it's rooted in self-respect, self-awareness, and emotional clarity, then it's not cruelty at all. It's an invitation for something deeper, A connection based not on need, but on mutual attraction, space, and resonance. And remember, space is not the absence of love, it's the stage on which desire performs. When you stop rushing to fill the silence, you give her a chance to listen for the echo of your value. And if she hears it, she'll come closer. Not because you begged her to, but because something in your restraint awakened something in her longing. Let's talk about one of the quietest forms of self-sabotage in relationships: validation seeking. Most men don't even realize they're doing it. It's subtle. It can sound like compliments disguised as questions. It looks like over-explaining yourself after she pulls back. It often shows up in the nervous need to constantly be liked, to constantly be approved of, to constantly be told you're doing it right. And yet, ironically, this need for validation is the very thing that makes a man feel less secure, less respected, and ultimately less desired. When a man seeks validation from a woman, what he's really saying, without words, is, "I don't fully believe in my own worth unless you confirm it." Now, on a human level, we all crave connection, reassurance, and acceptance. That's not weakness, it's wiring. But when your identity hinges on external feedback, especially from someone you're trying to attract, you lose your center. You shift from being a sovereign man to being a boy trying to be chosen. And women can sense that, not on a conscious level perhaps, but on a visceral one. It erodes polarity, it neutralizes masculine presence. There's a fundamental difference between wanting to connect and needing to be approved. One comes from abundance, the other from scarcity. And here's the thing: women are not attracted to emotional scarcity. They're drawn to men who are already full, already certain, already affirmed. Men who aren't chasing affirmation like a thirsty animal in a desert. A man who doesn't constantly look over his shoulder for validation walks differently. He speaks differently. He holds space differently. His energy says, "I am not here to be chosen. I am here to connect if it aligns, but I remain whole either way." Now, this doesn't mean becoming emotionally detached or indifferent. That's just another mask, another way to protect yourself from potential rejection. What we're talking about is emotional anchoring, being able to stay rooted in your own reality, even in the presence of female approval or disapproval. And let's be honest, women will test you. Not to play games, not to manipulate, but to feel the truth of your center. To sense if you're really who you say you are. And if you crumble at the slightest resistance, the attraction fades, because she no longer feels your strength. She only feels your need. Validation seeking can take many forms. Maybe it's the way you interpret her silence as a personal failure. Maybe it's how you ask if she's still interested every time her tone shifts. Maybe it's texting her too often, not because you're inspired, but because you're anxious. Maybe it's showing up to every conversation with the hidden agenda of winning points. And here's the paradox. The more you do that, the less she trusts your authenticity. Because underneath your words, she feels the performance. She feels that you're not expressing yourself for the sake of truth, but for the sake of approval. And nothing is less sexy than that. Psychologically, this ties into what's called an external locus of identity. When your sense of worth is dependent on how others see you, you live in a state of quiet panic. You're always adapting, shifting, editing yourself to avoid disapproval. But in doing so, you lose access to your own intuitive knowing. You become so outwardly focused that you forget who you are without an audience. And women, they don't fall in love with the man who performs. They fall in love with the man who remains clear, honest, grounded, even in the face of ambiguity, from a philosophical lens. This raises a question: who are you when no one is watching? When no one is applauding, liking, or texting back? If your confidence evaporates without external feedback, then you're not actually confident. You're rented confidence. And rented confidence always comes with a price. It's never really yours. What women deeply respect, even if they don't articulate it, is a man who's self-referenced. A man who doesn't fold when she pulls away. A man who doesn't rush to fix a vibe shift. A man who doesn't need to be constantly reassured that he's okay. Because that man gives her something rare: safety. Not safety in the weak sense of "I'll never upset you," but safety in the powerful sense of "you can't shake me." That's where true desire is born. In the presence of a man who is emotionally self-reliant, not cold, not distant, but clear. A man who offers presence, not pressure. Who listens without the hidden need to be liked. Who gives love from abundance, not as a trade for reassurance. And when that happens, something remarkable unfolds. She starts to feel free in his presence. Free to relax, free to desire, free to open. Because there's no undercurrent of need tugging at her constantly, asking, "Do you still like me?" You don't have to say much when you're rooted in self-belief. Your presence speaks volumes. It tells her, "I want you here, but I do not need you here to feel whole." And that clarity gives her space to feel her own desire, to choose you from her own volition, not from guilt or obligation. That's powerful. That's magnetic. And it only comes when you stop outsourcing your sense of self to how she responds. So what's the invitation here? Stop trying to be liked. Start trying to be true. Stop rehearsing lines to win her over. Start listening to what's real inside you. Because the more you need someone to affirm you, the more likely you are to betray yourself in the process. And women, they feel that betrayal before you do. They feel the moment you abandon your truth for their comfort. And while they may not call it out directly, they'll drift emotionally, energetically, until one day you're left wondering what went wrong. Let's go deeper into a truth that many modern men still resist. A man who puts himself first is not selfish, he's sovereign. There's a reason why the moment you stop chasing, the moment you prioritize your own time, energy and mission, the dynamic with women often shifts dramatically. Suddenly she starts leaning in, she pays more attention, she asks more questions. Why? Because something about a man who doesn't make her the center of his world activates something primal in her psychology. It sends a message that is far more powerful than words. I am a man of direction. I have a life that doesn't depend on you. This is not about neglect. It's not about emotional unavailability or treating her like she doesn't matter. That's a misinterpretation. What we're talking about is a deep alignment to your own path, your work, your creativity, your growth, your health, your inner compass. And when you operate from that place, you exude something rare in the dating world today, unapologetic self-prioritization. Now here's the nuance. We live in a culture that increasingly glorifies emotional sensitivity in men. And that's important. Vulnerability matters. But not all vulnerability is created equal. There's a version of vulnerability that is rooted in truth. And there's another version that is thinly veiled dependence. When a man leaks his energy all over a woman, hoping she'll validate his existence, he may think he's being open. But what he's actually doing is handing over his power. Women don't want to feel like the source of your motivation. They want to witness your motivation. You see, for a woman to fully open, to trust, to surrender, to invest emotionally, she must feel that you are more committed to your life than to her approval. That doesn't mean she isn't important. It means she's inspired by your priorities, not the center of them. The man who stops showing up to the gym because she wants more time. The man who cancels plans with friends to prove his devotion. The man who pauses his creative pursuits to accommodate her feelings. He may win short-term approval, but he loses long-term respect. And without respect, there is no lasting desire. From a psychological standpoint, we know that women are attracted not just to who a man is, but to where he's going, his trajectory, his momentum. His capacity to lead himself. That's what gives her the safety to relax into her own feminine expression. When she senses that you're living on purpose, with or without her, she doesn't feel rejected, she feels drawn in. Because that level of self-possession is grounding. It tells her this man won't collapse under pressure. This man won't lose himself in the relationship. This man is building something bigger than just emotional comfort. It's important to say this out loud. Your life is not a backdrop for her emotional movie. You are not a supporting character in her narrative. You are the lead in your own. And if you don't claim that role fully, she will feel it. She might not say anything. She might even stay for a while. But internally, she starts drifting. Because nothing is more repelling than a man who quietly abandons himself under the guise of being supportive. We have to stop associating masculine self-prioritization with toxicity. It's not toxic to say, I'm working tonight. It's not toxic to say, no, I need this weekend for myself. It's not toxic to go silent while you sort through your thoughts, rather than explain everything in real time. What's toxic is pretending you're okay with being emotionally overextended when deep down, you're quietly resentful and misaligned. That's what leads to passive aggression, burnout, and the slow decay of attraction. And here's the paradox: the more you put yourself first, the more emotionally available you become. Because you're not operating from depletion. You're not expecting her to regulate your emotions. You're bringing presence, not pressure. And that's what makes your presence feel safe, reliable, grounded. You're no longer clinging, you're inviting, not chasing, just showing up, fully intact, with or without her approval. Philosophically, this taps into the archetype of the integrated man. The man who walks with purpose, who chooses love without losing self, who gives generously but never abandons his path. He is rare because he is whole, and wholeness is magnetic. Women don't need you to be perfect, but they do need to feel that your sense of identity is not up for negotiation every time they express discomfort or doubt. You can hear her emotions, empathize with them, even adapt when it aligns. But you don't change your core just to keep the peace. Peace at the cost of self is not peace, it's quiet defeat. One of the deepest mistakes men make is believing that being emotionally available means being constantly accessible. It doesn't. True emotional availability means you can be with someone fully without losing contact with yourself. It means you're open, not porous, present, not pliable. She wants to feel that your life has a gravitational pull of its own, that you are orbiting a vision, not orbiting her. And when you live this way, when your priorities are intact, when your calendar reflects your values, when your time and energy are invested intentionally, she doesn't feel neglected. She feels relieved, because the burden to carry the emotional direction of the relationship is no longer on her shoulders. You've reclaimed it. You've stepped into your natural polarity. You've become the man whose presence is not only desired but trusted. So the next time you feel guilty for choosing your path, ask yourself, am I choosing against her, or am I simply choosing for myself? Because if you're grounded in love, in clarity, and in truth, the answer is likely the latter. And if she's the right woman, she won't resist it. She'll rise to meet it. Because high-value women are not drawn to men who give them everything. They're drawn to men who give themselves everything first, and then choose to share from a place of abundance, not obligation. One of the greatest misunderstandings in modern relationships is the belief that saying yes is always the loving response, that giving in, agreeing, or avoiding friction will create closeness. But the truth is, a man without boundaries is not seen as kind, he is seen as weak. And in the eyes of a woman, that weakness eventually becomes unattractive, even if she can't articulate why. Boundaries aren't walls. They're not emotional armor. They're not cold detachment or rigid control. At their core, boundaries are clarity, the clarity of who you are, what you need, and where your limits lie. And when a man expresses those limits, not with anger or ego, but with calm certainty, he immediately changes the emotional equation, because boundaries are the silent language of self-respect. And self-respect is the oxygen of desire. It may seem counterintuitive. After all, we're taught to believe that love means compromise. And yes, there's truth in that. But compromise without self-possession is not love. It's collapse. It's the slow erosion of authenticity in favor of harmony. And what begins as a desire to please often ends in quiet resentment. The man who always says, who never pushes back, who tries to accommodate every emotion and avoid every tension is not loving. He's afraid. Afraid of rejection. Afraid of being seen as harsh. Afraid of the discomfort that comes with holding a line. And women can feel that fear. Not consciously, maybe, but they register it. It's in your tone when you backtrack. It's in your eyes when you seek reassurance after asserting something. It's in the way you soften your truth in the hope of being accepted. And with each subtle concession, what you believe is a loving gesture becomes, ironically, a slow decay of the very attraction you're trying to preserve. The psychology behind this is rooted in what we call differentiation. The ability to stay connected to someone while still staying connected to yourself. Most men either overmerge, becoming whatever she needs them to be, or they detach completely to avoid conflict. But true masculine power lives in the middle, in the man who can hold space for her emotions without being pulled into them, in the man who can say no with kindness and yes without losing himself. Because when a woman meets a man who has clear, consistent boundaries, she feels something many women rarely feel in romantic relationships: safety. Not the safety of comfort, the safety of integrity, of consistency, of a man who means what he says and says what he means. That kind of clarity is rare. It tells her you are not a leaf in the wind. You are rooted. And that rootedness doesn't just create respect. It creates erotic charge. Because when a woman doesn't have to guess where your edges are, when she doesn't have to test you to find your strength, she relaxes. She trusts. And trust is the soil where attraction grows. Now, let's be honest, saying no is hard. Especially when you're emotionally invested, especially when you're dealing with a strong, passionate, intelligent woman who doesn't like being challenged, and she may push back, she may resist, she may accuse you of being cold or distant or difficult. But that's not a cue to retreat. That's an invitation to stay grounded, because the man who can remain present in the face of feminine intensity without collapsing or controlling is the man who becomes unforgettable. Philosophically, this brings us to the concept of tension. Real intimacy doesn't come from avoiding tension. It comes from moving through it. And boundaries create that tension. They force both people to confront their own desires, limits, and patterns. When you say, I'm not okay with that, or I need space right now, or this doesn't work for me, you're not creating distance. You're inviting maturity. You're saying, I trust you enough to be honest with you, and I trust myself enough not to betray my truth for comfort. And here's the paradox. What many men fear will push women away. Their boundaries is often what makes her come closer. Not because you're withholding love, but because you're holding your ground, because you're signaling that your love is real. But it's not unlimited. It has shape, it has structure, it has standards, and standards, when communicated clearly and consistently, become deeply attractive. They tell her, I'm not here to control you, but I won't be controlled either. And let me say this clearly, boundaries are not ultimatums. They're not threats. They're not punishments. They're invitations to meet you at the level of mutual respect. They're expressions of self-love. And when a man loves himself enough to honor his limits, he becomes magnetic. Not because he's hard to get, but because he's hard to shake. In practice, this might look like not responding to a disrespectful message right away. Not out of pettiness, but out of principle. It might look like walking away from a woman who repeatedly crosses your emotional boundaries, even if the chemistry is strong. It might look like taking space during an argument, rather than engaging in reactive conflict. It's in these moments, not the grand gestures, that your masculine frame is tested and revealed. And here's what's most interesting. Boundaries not only make you more attractive, they also teach her how to trust herself. Because when she sees that you can hold your own, she doesn't have to carry the burden of leading the emotional dynamic. She doesn't have to constantly test you to find where you stand. Your no becomes a gift. It becomes the moment she feels your presence, your clarity, your backbone. And that, more than any compliment or romantic gesture, makes her feel safe enough to fully open. So don't be afraid of your own limits. Don't shrink your truth to protect her feelings. Don't mistake compliance for connection. Because love that is bought at the cost of self-respect is never love. It's emotional slavery. And no woman truly desires a man she can emotionally enslave. There's a particular rhythm to attraction. One that isn't linear, one that doesn't obey logic, and one that almost always includes a kind of emotional dance. We call this the push-pull dynamic. It's the natural tension between closeness and distance, between availability and elusiveness, between connection and autonomy. And when a man understands how to embody this rhythm, not as a tactic, but as a way of being rooted in presence and polarity, he activates something in a woman that is deeper than interest. He activates longing. Now, most men avoid this tension. They think that consistency means constant emotional availability. They believe that once they've connected, the next step is to give everything, to call every day, to text non-stop, to stay emotionally on at all times. But what they don't realize is that constant emotional availability dulls desire. Not because women are fickle or ungrateful, but because desire requires space. And when that space disappears, so does the mystery. Think of it like this: fire needs oxygen to burn. If you smother the flame with too much fuel, it suffocates. Emotional intensity without space becomes overwhelming. It turns desire into pressure. And pressure, especially the needy kind, repels. On the other hand, pulling away too much, creating too much distance, being too aloof, also kills attraction. What you're looking for is that edge, that subtle tension that keeps her guessing just enough to stay curious, while still feeling safe in your presence. This dynamic isn't about manipulation. It's about understanding the emotional tempo that keeps desire alive. It's about knowing when to lean in and when to step back, when to offer warmth and when to allow silence, when to reveal more of yourself, and when to let her wonder. Most importantly, it's about doing this not to control her response, but to honor your own energetic truth. Because here's the key: the push-pull dynamic only works when it's authentic. If you're pulling away just to create reaction, that's not power, that's performance. If you're pushing just to get approval, that's not connection, that's compensation. The magnetic man doesn't choreograph his behavior for effect. He simply lives from a place of inner alignment. He's connected enough to his own rhythms that his presence feels unpredictable. Not in a chaotic way, but in an alive way. Women don't want to solve you. They want to feel moved by you. From a psychological perspective, this tension triggers emotional investment. When a woman feels like she can access you, but not entirely possess you, her mind stays engaged. Her heart stays open. She starts to participate in the emotional dance. She texts you because she wants to. She thinks about you when you're not around. She wonders where your attention is, what you're doing. Not because you're withholding love, but because you're not flooding her with it. There's enough space for her to miss you. The most attractive relationships, the ones that feel electric long past the early stages, are never built on constant closeness. They're built on rhythm, on emotional cadence, on space and tension and curiosity.